And look, at the end of the day, the media wants to have a conversation about whether what Harrison Butker said was morally right or morally wrong. And that is a different conversation than did the city retaliate against him on the basis of his free expression of his religious beliefs in violation of the law. Free expression of religion in the public domain is protected by the First Amendment, whether the talking heads like that or not.
Welcome to the Bailey Wire Podcast, where we open the files on the biggest legal stories in Missouri. We'll explore what these issues mean in simple terms, how they impact you, and give insight into the actions by the Missouri Attorney General's Office. Here's your host, Brandon Rathard.
Welcome into the Bailey Wire Podcast. So on May the 11th, this guy just in the Super Bowl a couple of months ago, he's a kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's given the commencement address at St. Benedictine College. Somebody's videotaping. It gets out there into the Twitterverse and on the internet, and there's a bunch of folks that do not agree with what Harrison Butker, kicker for the Chiefs, said. Then on the official X page for the city of Kansas City, a tweet goes out, in effect saying where Harrison Butker lives. Let's bring him to the show now. Missouri's Attorney General Andrew Bailey. Let's start here. What exactly was in that tweet?
Well, this is from the city's official X account. And what they tweeted was essentially an attempt to dox Harrison Butker to identify his city of residence in an attempt to retaliate against him for the free exercise of his religious beliefs. Potentially, it's a violation of his constitutional rights to be free from religious persecution. And it's also potentially a violation of the Missouri Human Rights Act that protects individuals against retaliation by the government for based on religion.
So that's what made your ears perk up. This is from an official. This is not a personal Twitter account. This is from an official government account, and in effect, it's criticizing somebody who spoke their very devout Catholic Christian beliefs. And besides it being against the Constitution, from what I understand, there's also the Missouri Human Rights Act that details this. Now, shortly after, we want to get more into the meat of what's happening here, but then Mayor Lucas, he says it was not an appropriate post for the city of Kansas City. It should not have ever been up. And let's take the moral issues aside. Why should that have not been up on the city's official X page?
Look, our right under the First Amendment to free exercise of our religion comes from God, not man. And we're protected against the government by the First Amendment right to free exercise of religion. That's the problem. But look, the apology that the mayor has offered here rings somewhat hollow. He's not saying that it was the substance of it was wrong. In other words, he's not apologized to Harrison Butker. He's just saying, we shouldn't have said it on this Twitter account. I mean, I think it's really prophetic if you listen to what Harrison Butker actually said in his commencement speech. And I see this all the time, where you have this issue that is enveloped in the news cycle. And there are so many commentators who don't actually drill down and listen to or look at the thing they're going to talk about. I think that's true in this instance. But what Harrison Butker actually said in the beginning of his commencement address is that the left wants to drive expression of Christian thought and belief from the public domain, from public discourse. And that is exactly what the mayor has tried to do. He's not apologized for that. That's exactly what the radical left has tried to do, what the NFL and the Kansas City Star have now tried to do. It is shameful that they are discriminating against Harrison Butker for the free exercise of his religious beliefs. And we're going to use every ounce of authority that the state has to protect Missourians in their exercise of their constitutional right to free expression of religion without discrimination from the government or anyone else.
And I think we need to drill down a little bit, too, in saying, well, sure, these folks, they also have freedom of speech, but when you're representing an official government social media page, that's what makes this different.
That's exactly right. Using government resources to retaliate against Christians for the free exercise of their free expression of their religious beliefs is wrong.
It's wrong. Attorney General Andrew Bailey here on the Bailey Wire today, and we want to talk about the Missouri Human Rights Act and what that is exactly. And I think the other thing, interesting, the point about how a lot of news outlets, and they all do it, by the way, the national, local, state, they all do it. They take something, they drill down, and they find something that will fit their narrative. But what's stunning is if you follow, you can take one story, Attorney General, you can take one story, let's say it's on a national level, and let's say it has to do with a train derailment or something, and you take all these different news outlets. Sometimes the coverage of the news will leave your head spinning because you don't know what to believe, regardless of what it is. And I'm guessing that you've seen some of that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, especially in the 24-hour news cycle and with the prevalence of social media, the way in which people receive information is very different now than when I was a child. I remember, in the old days, 1980s, 1990s, my father would come home from work. The news would come on at 5 p.m. There's an individual who was methodically delivering the news of the day. You would see print media, which was much more prevalent back then. And now the news cycle spins so quickly. And I think more people get their information from social media than ever before in the history of the world. And so you have these new mediums of communication and that have fostered new forms of communication that exacerbate that issue.
And I think it's because back in my day, it was Walter Cronkite. That's right. And
yes.
That's the way it was.
Thick-rimmed glasses, yeah.
Yes. And you just watched the news, and it was largely, with a few, and there are some famous exceptions for Mr. Cronkite, but with usually it was just, here is the news, and it's really hard to find that anymore.
When it was delivered, again, methodically, and it appeared to be delivered objectively. And that's what's missing now. In other words, now you've got more editorial, more commentary, and it's delivered in a way that's intended to grab headlines. It's not delivered in a way that's intended to maintain focus over a long period of time. It's just a flash in the pan to catch attention for a brief moment. And so the information that's in the public domain is it's packaged differently, and we receive it differently.
And it's interesting as I read coverage here across the state of Missouri, some of the things that I've been seeing. So this thing with the mayor's office in Kansas City and the Harris, by the way, his Twitter handle is Butkicker. It is hashtag Butkicker. I love that. I know. I like the guy's sense of humor. This is not personal in telling the mayor of Kansas City, like, hey, just a second here. This has to do, the way I'm reading this, Attorney General, is it's the law.
That's absolutely right. The law prohibits discrimination on the basis of religion. It prohibits discrimination on the basis of race. It prohibits discrimination on the basis of ethnicity or national origin. And so it's important that we use those laws to protect Christians as well.
Yeah. And we see that with other things too. We think, well, it's the law, and unfortunately, and kind of inadvertently, we go back to a little bit of our media discussion. Again, national, state, local, whatever it is. If you read and believe the headlines, so often we get a skewed or an incorrect version of what's going on. And I think with some of these things that we see in this office, it's not personal.
That's right.
I'm Missouri's top law enforcement official.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, the media wants to have a conversation about whether what Harrison Butker said was morally right or morally wrong. And that is a different conversation than, did the city retaliate against him on the basis of his free expression of his religious beliefs in violation of the law? And we've got to keep going back to that conversation and not be distracted by the kind of rapidly turning carousel of opinions in the mainstream media about whether or not there should be public discourse about Christianity. Free expression of religion in the public domain is protected by the First Amendment, whether the talking heads like that or not. And certainly the law in the state of Missouri is it is illegal to discriminate on the basis of religion.
Yeah. So it's about the law, and I think that's one of the things that we wanted to cover here. You know, these things they're not personal, and I'm guessing. And by the way, I said I'm the Attorney General. I was speaking, not me personally. I meant, I was kind of imitating Mr. Andrew Bailey here. But it's the law, and I'm guessing the Attorney General, you don't necessarily get to pick and choose.
The Attorney General's office doesn't write law. That's what the General Assembly does. Under separation of powers, the legislative branch writes law. The head of the executive branch, the governor, signs it into law and makes it effective or vetoes it. And we work with the laws that are on the books. And the Missouri Human Rights Act has served the people of Missouri to prohibit discrimination on the basis of race or religion for the past several decades, and we will continue to use that as a tool in our arsenal to fight back against this kind of discriminatory act.
Follow the laws as written. We don't get to pick and choose. Andrew Bailey here, our Missouri Attorney General on the Bailey Wire. By the way, coming up on Monday, we are going to be dropping a really interesting episode as it relates to Memorial Day. That'll be coming up on Monday. You can check all of our social medias to find that, and let some of the folks know, hey, there's some interesting things happening here in the Bailey Wire podcast. podcast. And before we let you go, unless there's anything else that you want to cover as it relates to this potential violation of the Missouri Human Rights Act and this potential violation of the First Amendment with Quentin Lucas and hashtag Butker, anything else you want to add? You feel like we've covered this all right?
Yeah, again, I just want to emphasize this is about protecting Missourians' right to free expression of religious beliefs without fear of retaliation by government officials. We are enforcing the rules against discrimination on the basis of religion.
Mr. Attorney General Andrew Bailey, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on.